Now let's focus on what's going wrong with EdTech firm Byju's. Over the last 1 year, the poster boy of India's startup sector and India's EdTech sector, Byju's, has seen searches by the Enforcement Directorate, valuation cuts by prominent investors, a legal battle with lenders over repayment terms, layoffs, delayed financial results, the group's IPO being stuck, and several other problems, all in a matter of one single year. The company's valuation too has come down from $22 billion in its golden days to just half of that, to around $11 billion now in the latest round. Now, on the consumer side as well, parents of several students who signed up for Byju's services are facing issues over the teaching staff, their teaching method and efficiency as well, and they are facing issues over fee refunds. According to a survey by LocalCircles, over the last 1 year, 32% of users have faced issues with Byju's. 81% of EdTech platform users surveyed through LocalCircles have faced issues, but most of them faced issues with just Byju's. The string of bad news for the EdTech startup leads to questions about the Indian startup sector at large. Byju's was once the poster boy of Indian tech startups and even startups in India as a whole. It was one of India's most valuable unicorns. So that big name now being surrounded by doubts makes us question what's next for Indian startups. The implications could well go beyond Byju's as investors focus on profitability and governance as well. So to really understand what all has happened over the last 1 year, we have my colleague Rishabh Bhatnagar, who's joining us from the BQ Prime newsroom. And Rishabh, thanks very much for joining us. And if you could just help us understand what all has went wrong with Byju's over the last 1 year.
Right. Thanks, Priyanshi, for that. Just to sort of understand why Byju's is where it is today, let's go back to when the pandemic sort of started waning, right? During the pandemic, a lot of investors started flocking and piling money into startups. And during the pandemic, obviously, digital services and goods were in very, very high demand. As soon as the pandemic sort of waned out, and the world started opening up, this sort of bullishness that a lot of these tech giants were depending on, that did not meet with the demand. That's why we also saw a lot of global tech corporations such as Amazon and Meta, all of them did massive layoffs. So even with Byju's, its valuation soared during the pandemic. And as soon as the pandemic sort of opened up, the demand for its products and services fell. It had done a lot of hiring during the pandemic, hoping that this sort of environment and this sort of demand would stay, but it did not. And so let's go back a year, right? Starting June 2022, which is when their Byju's two acquisitions, the Topper and White Hat Junior, both of them laid off about 500 employees. So that's where sort of the first signs of negative development started at Byju's. 3 months later, in September 2022, Byju's filed its FY21 earnings, which were already very delayed. So Byju's has come under a lot of regulatory pressure for filing their results very, very late. The Ministry of Corporate Affairs, which regulates these unlisted firms, they stipulate that financial earnings for the financial year should be filed within 6 months, but Byju's filed it around 18 months late. So that's the second very, very pivotal negative development at Byju's that happened in September 2022. In their FY21 earnings as well, they posted losses of about 4,500 crores. That was a 13-fold rise from the previous year, which is a very, very massive loss for an EdTech unicorn of that size. Then about a month later, in November 2022, a lot of negative developments started happening at Byju's. Its valuation was cut internally. Yeah.
Right. All right. Rishabh, thanks very much for joining us with those details. And as Rishabh just pointed out, that the last financial statements that we have from Byju are for the financial year 2021. 2022, 2023, we don't know much as the financials have been delayed. Along with that, the losses have really been growing over the last few years. So to understand what's really going on with Byju's, we have some guests joining us on the broadcast. We have K. Ganesh, who's a serial entrepreneur, as they call it, who's the promoter of Big Basket and Portia Medical Medical, Home Lane and Bluestone as well. We also have Deepak Joyce, the founder of Joyce Law, which is a law firm that's focused on the Indian startup ecosystem. Along with that, we have Sudarshan, who's a parent of a student who was enrolled with Byju's. Along with that, we also have Priyanka Kumari, who's also a parent who has used Byju's services. So to really understand, my first question would be to you, K. Ganesh. Byju's was the poster boy of India's startup sector. So has that bubble burst, if I ask that question to you?
Yeah, clearly there's been a string of bad news, one after the other, shocks for Byju's. It's very unfortunate because it is the largest valued startup from India and one of the largest valued in the world, and addressing a very core need of the society, which if I distinct issue, should not sensationalize it. No, that's not the right thing to do. But there are 4 distinct issues. One clearly is a business model issue. If you look at it, what is the core of a business model? It was less about education, more about a hardware business. They were taking a tablet or a hardware, bundling it with some content and selling it to parents. 70 or 80%, it's a hardware business. Now, question remains, the hardware business is a very highly competitive, low margin business. It cannot attract such high valuation. So that's one business model issue. 2, they had acquired White Hat Junior, which does online coding teaching. Now, that's a very extremely tough business. The cost of acquiring a customer. So in Byju's, the first issue was a business model. Have shown there are governance issues. You have mentioned about delays in audit. Now, a large company, a unicorn valued at $22 billion, to say that it cannot put systems and process in place to get the audit completed in time, to get the compliance done, is unconscionable. So that is a real major issue that. Along with that committed is the debt issue. They have raised $1.2 billion of debt. When the payment becomes due, they end up suing the lender and stopping the payment. That again is a major governance issue. Third is reputation issue vis-a-vis parents that we will hear about in terms of how whether selling, mis-selling, aggressive selling, wrong selling. And the fourth one, the final one, is the market issue, where entire post-pandemic, all the EdTechs, not just Byju's, and many of the tech companies that relied on the tailwinds of the pandemic have seen a huge drop in valuation. That is one. 2, when the pandemic stopped, people have gone back to school and gone away from online education. So that is a market issue. So I think all the 4 issues coming together at the same time, it's unfortunate, but I do hope they come out of it because they do have a silver lining. They own Akash. Akash is an offline center, and that's really the silver lining there.
Right. So there are still some hopes for Byju's in some places that they can work on to recover from this. And on those points, on those considerably wrong decisions that Byju's could have made, I want to come to you, Mr. Joyce. Are there some significantly wrong decisions that Byju's made? As we've pointed out, that Byju's decided to acquire White Hat in 2020, then Akash and Topper in 2021, and this, even though it was making losses. So one, serious wrong decisions that were made, according to you. What do you think on that? On the other side, as we've mentioned, that this is one of India's most valued startups. So does that raise a question over the startup industry at large, and will it make it difficult for other startups to also get funds?
Sure. So, focusing on the first question of whether the acquisition decisions were wrong, I think, at some, to some extent at least, what might have been a function of the decision to acquire would have been the metrics used for valuation, which, if I'm not mistaken, at that time was very top line focused metrics for valuation. So, if you look around, we see a lot of instances of startups acquiring revenue without possibly necessarily not without validating the target's business model and target's unit economics. So, you can't put it past any of the startups and Byju's naturally that they might have also done that. so was that a wrong decision? So at that time, it certainly did not look like a wrong decision. Now, as Ganesh pointed out, multiple things have happened. Multiple macro factors have come to bear in the last 12 to 18 months. The biggest being the world economy shrinking when the central bank started backing down on inflation.
So is most of the troubles because the pandemic happened and then the world economy shrank, of course, or is it something particularly wrong with Byju's?
So I think it is more to do with macroeconomics if you look at the entire cycle, because it was the pandemic that drove up the demand drove up the demand in an unnatural cycle or through an unnatural cycle, which was relied upon by sources of capital to put in a lot of, to deploy a lot of capital into many businesses. And when that demand pulled back, the revenue stand, there were questions raised on the models, and on top of it, the market shrunk. The liquidity got sucked out of the market, which made ongoing funding for growth and for sustenance a difficult proposition.
Right,
so all of this has come to bear for Byju's.
Right. So while we've understood the operational part of it and the investor part of it, let's also turn to the consumer side of it now. A survey, as I mentioned, of LocalCircles shows that 32% of users of Byju have faced issues. So we have some of those users who are joining us on the broadcast. We have Sudarshan and Priyanka Kumari. First, if I can come to you, Sudarshan, what were the issues, if at all, you faced with using Byju's?
Hi, thank you for having me here. It's Sudarshana and I'm from Kolkata. My son is in class 9 and I was told that he had, come third on some competition that Byju's had held, which my son wasn't absolutely aware of, and it was insisted that I come and collect a certificate. Right. Now, when I went to collect the certificate, there was this thing that, Byju's, if we could give a trial for the Byju's, take the home model, etc., and tuition. Now, because he's already good in PCM, I wasn't too keen, but there was a home model, which I thought that, okay, I may give it a shot. Now, there was this clear-cut understanding that there would be a trial period of 15 days, post which, if we did not like the module, there was a condition that we'll get 100% refund of that amount. Classes did not happen on time, and the other classes that were supposed to happen instead of the missing classes did not take place. I did not find the faculty to be as good as I thought them to
be. So you
had
an issue with getting the refund of that trial period fee, and
absolutely. And I mailed to them on the 15th day of my son starting the class.
That in fact has been a popular issue. Priyanka Kumari, if I can come to you next. Sorry to interrupt you, Sudarshana. But Priyanka Kumari, did you face a similar issue?
Yes, sometimes I face this issue, but now it's okay.
All right. So what were some of the issues that you faced with Byju's, or was it
their classes, sometimes it's not going on, issues like network issues and all. And teachers also, they are not coming this type of problem.
Right. तो आपको टीचर्स के क्वालिटी से भी प्रॉब्लम महसूस हुई, टीचर्स किस तरह से पढ़ा रही हैं उससे भी?
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. And so there you heard it from the consumers as well, that there are problems with fee refunds. There are problems with the quality of the teaching staff, the changes in the teaching staff as well. And you've also heard that there are several operational issues, several decisions that could have been made incorrectly within Byju's. And Sudarshana, just a closing remark from you on what do you think does this mean for the trust of parents in EdTech firms? Will you, does this impact your future trust for any educational app?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am going to have severe trust issues going forward in putting my hard-earned money and my children's future on any EdTech going forward.
Right. Well, thanks very much for joining us.
And it is very unfortunate.
It is extremely unfortunate, and we've all talked about Byju's, and that has been hailed as one of India's leading startups. And if that's proving to be an example to make people not go on EdTech firms or to make people doubt startups even further, then that definitely is unfortunate. Well, thanks very much for joining us and really helping us understand what are the issues with Byju's from both an operational side and from an investor side and also from a consumer side. But as has been mentioned by Mr. K. Ganesh, that there are still things that Byju's can work on. There are some silver linings. So let's wait to see whether that happens or whether this tale of troubles continues. That's all we have for you in this show. Thanks very much for watching. News continues on the other side.